So, what if the primary cause of your medical suffering, I mean, the thing that is actually breaking hospitals and driving millions of people into this lifelong medical dependency, what if it isn't a mysterious virus at all?
Right. Or some untreatable superbug.
Exactly. What if the root of the entire global healthcare crisis is actually your own conscious mind's reaction to fear?
It is a massive, completely counterintuitive paradigm shift. I mean, it completely upends how we even think about what it means to be sick.
It really does. So, welcome to today's deep dive. We are exploring a truly revolutionary approach to modern medicine today.
Yeah, and this is all driven by the life's work of Dr. Srivatsa.
Right, a doctor who has spent over 40 years in acute and critical care. We are talking about 4 decades right at the bleeding edge of life and death, dealing with, severe infections, massive trauma, and crucially, terrified patients.
And through that extensive frontline experience, he arrives at this startling conclusion. He realized that the modern medical system is fundamentally broken.
Because it's built on a foundation of fear, right?
Right. Exactly. Fear and these incredibly rigid industrialized protocols. But he didn't just diagnose the disease of the medical system, he actually engineered a cure.
Which is the fascinating part. We are going to unpack how artificial intelligence, specifically large language models like ChatGPT, is currently being deployed to completely dismantle this fear-based infrastructure.
We have a phenomenal stack of sources guiding our conversation today, too.
We do. We're drawing deeply on Dr. Srivatsa's own comprehensive writings, including his works titled At the Heart of Healthcare Innovation and Beacon of Hope.
Yeah, plus we've got access to detailed project proposals and press releases for this genuinely revolutionary solar-powered AI hardware system.
Right, the Prema Health kiosk. We'll be cross-referencing all of these claims against official World Health Organization protocols on global outbreak investigations as well.
So, the mission for our discussion today is to connect some seemingly disparate dots. We really need to bridge the gap between the microscopic neurochemistry of your own brain when you feel a symptom, the bureaucratic structures of hospital management, and, well, the macroscopic existential threat of antimicrobial resistance.
Yeah, so if you're listening to this, get ready because we are going straight down the rabbit hole.
Let's do it.
Let's start with the brain. Because a major focus in the research we're looking at today revolves around how scientists are finally beginning to understand the mechanics of the conscious mind.
Right, especially since the recent explosions in AI and quantum computing. It's like we finally have the vocabulary to explain reality.
Exactly. And Dr. Srivatsa points out this glaring, fatal vulnerability in human consciousness. Your brain literally cannot tell the difference between a physical threat and an imagined fear.
It's wild. And to understand why this happens, we have to look at the architecture of the brain itself, specifically, the amygdala and the HPA axis.
The hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis.
That's the one. From an evolutionary standpoint, your brain is just this ancient survival machine, right? It's optimized for a very specific prehistoric environment.
Okay, so paint a picture for us.
Sure. Let's imagine you're a hunter-gatherer walking in the woods.
Yeah.
And a saber-toothed tiger jumps out of the brush. Your amygdala, which is the brain's threat detection center, it fires instantly.
It doesn't ask for permission.
No, it just acts. It sounds the alarm.
And sends a distress signal.
Exactly. It sends that signal to the hypothalamus, which acts like a command center.
Mm-hmm.
That communicates with the rest of the body through the nervous system, which triggers the adrenal glands to pump out just massive amounts of adrenaline and cortisol.
So at a cellular level, your body is instantly reconfigured for survival.
Completely. Your heart rate skyrockets to pump blood to your muscles. Your breathing becomes rapid and shallow to take in more oxygen.
You start sweating to cool down.
Right, and your chest tightens. This is the acute stress response, the classic fight or flight mechanism.
And, in the context of the tiger, that physiological cascade is brilliant. It gives you the explosive energy you need to run away or fight for your life.
No, it is highly adaptive for acute physical dangers. But here's where the evolutionary mismatch occurs in the modern world.
Because there are no tigers anymore.
Exactly. Let's say there is no tiger. Let's say you're just sitting on your couch, you feel a slight tickle in your throat, and you suddenly remember a news report you saw about a deadly new respiratory virus.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Your conscious mind starts looping on a hypothetical.
Right. What if I have it? What if I end up on a ventilator? The imagination takes over.
And this is the terrifying biological reality, isn't it?
Yes. Your amygdala cannot differentiate between the physical tiger standing in front of you and the imagined virus looping in your prefrontal cortex.
Wow.
It processes the thought of the threat exactly the same way it processes a physical attack. It triggers the exact same HPA axis response. The adrenaline floods in. The cortisol spikes.
So you're sitting perfectly safe in your living room, but your body is undergoing this massive physiological trauma.
Precisely.
I really love the analogy of a home security system for this. It's like having a hypersensitive smoke detector in your kitchen.
Oh, that's a great way to look at it.
Yeah, so you slightly over-toast a piece of bread, a tiny wisp of smoke goes up, and the detector goes off. But the system is wired so aggressively that it doesn't just beep.
Right. It triggers a deafening siren.
It triggers the siren, it locks all the doors, turns on the sprinklers, and automatically calls the fire department, reporting that the entire house is a raging inferno.
That is exactly it. The body is calling the fire department over burnt toast. And, we really have to consider what this feels like to the person experiencing it.
It feels real.
Absolutely real. When that physiological smoke detector goes off, the physical sensations are intense and overwhelming. The chest tightness, the rapid heartbeat, the dizziness, the sudden fatigue.
To the patient, this does not feel like an abstract anxiety loop.
No, not at all. It feels like a severe, life-threatening physical illness. They truly feel like they are dying.
Well, and if their brain is acting like a blaring smoke detector, they aren't going to just sit at home and drink tea.
Of course not. They are going to storm the emergency room. Or the local chemist, right? And they demand an immediate fix.
They demand, as the source is literally, quote, something strong.
Which usually means antibiotics.
Even though antibiotics do absolutely nothing for a viral infection or stress, I have to imagine this completely clogs up the hospital wait times. It must just drain medical resources.
Oh, clogs up is honestly an understatement. It structurally compromises the entire healthcare system. The statistics provided in Dr. Srivatsa's research are just staggering. They paint a picture of a system collapsing under the weight of imagined fear.
What are the numbers?
Well, he notes that an incredible 76% of patients demanding an emergency appointment do not actually have a serious illness that requires a doctor's attention.
Wait, let me make sure I'm hearing those numbers right. 76%.
Yeah, 76%. Think about that volume.
So out of every 100 people rushing through the doors in a panic, 76 of them are essentially running from a tiger that doesn't exist.
Exactly. Only about 3.8% actually require a clinical examination.
3.8%. That is, if that's true, the waste of human capital, time, and money is astronomical.
It is astronomical. And the ripple effects are lethal. The sources highlight that up to 50% of all medical care could effectively be self-care.
Wow.
Because the infrastructure is suffocated by people suffering from these fear-induced physiological responses or just minor self-limiting ailments. The people who actually are in critical condition can't get through the bottleneck.
They're stuck in the waiting room.
Right. Dr. Srivatsa cites that 20% of deaths are entirely needless, caused simply by delayed consultation.
20%, just from waiting.
Yeah. People with bursting appendixes or silent heart attacks are stuck behind dozens of people with burnt toast.
And, it doesn't just affect the waiting room, right? It has to affect the doctor's cognitive performance, too.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, if you're an ER doctor and you see 50 people in a row who are just experiencing extreme anxiety masking as physical symptoms, you have to experience some kind of alarm fatigue.
Alarm fatigue and cognitive overload are rampant. When a physician is forced to process hundreds of non-emergencies at breakneck speed, their diagnostic sharpness just dulls.
You just start trying to get through the line.
Exactly. They start relying on heuristics, mental shortcuts, just to survive this shift. This perfectly explains another shocking statistic from the text. 13% of deaths are attributed to wrong diagnoses.
13%.
Yeah. When the system is overwhelmed by fear-driven traffic, doctors are rushed, they miss subtle physical cues, confirmation bias creeps in, and fatal errors are made.
Okay, so we've clearly established that the illusion of illness, this profound, biologically real fear response, is driving an unsustainable wave of humanity into the clinic.
Right.
But that logically brings us to the next stage of the problem. What actually happens when a terrified patient finally gets to the front of the line and sees the doctor?
That is the big question.
You would hope the doctor would sit down, look at them, understand the context, and say, hey, your house isn't on fire, you just burned some toast. Let's turn off the alarm and take a deep breath.
Yeah, you would hope.
But our sources indicate that this deeply human interaction has essentially been eradicated.
It has been systematically engineered out of the profession. To understand the magnitude of this loss, we really have to look at what Dr. Srivatsa defines as the true historical duty of a physician. He wrote extensively about this back in 1996.
What did he say?
He argues that a doctor's fundamental job is to listen to the story of the illness, as the fellow human has lived it, experienced it, and remembered it.
The story of the illness. I like that. That implies something far deeper than just a list of biological data points on a chart. It's narrative medicine.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Narrative medicine recognizes that an illness doesn't happen in a vacuum. Right?
Yeah.
It happens to a specific person in a specific context. Right. The doctor's job isn't merely to slap a Latin diagnostic code onto a symptom and hand over a pharmaceutical compound. The job is to identify the root cause of the suffering, which might be emotional or psychological.
And in Dr. Srivatsa's brilliant phrasing, to sell happiness.
Yes.
You know, I initially thought selling happiness sounded almost commercial.
He does a bit, yeah.
But when you really unpack it, it's profoundly holistic. Selling happiness means restoring the patient's physical and mental equilibrium. It means lowering that cortisol level, turning off the amygdala, and giving them peace of mind.
Which is the exact opposite of what usually happens.
Because the text is explicit. The art of listening to that story has come to a screeching halt. Why is that?
Because modern medicine has undergone this massive paradigm shift away from individualized narrative and heavily toward rigid, industrialized protocols and algorithms.
It's all about algorithms now.
Yeah, the system operates almost entirely on statistical significance. These guidelines are designed by committees to manage massive populations.
Yeah.
They aren't designed to treat the unique individual sitting on the exam table.
It is the absolute definition of a one-size-fits-all approach.
Completely.
Okay, I have to play devil's advocate here. I really want to push back on this because if I'm the patient, I want certainty.
Sure.
Aren't standardized protocols and tests there for a very good reason? Aren't they designed to prevent the exact human error we were just talking about?
Right, that's the logic.
If I come in with chest tightness, I don't just want a doctor to reassure me and sell me happiness. I want the EKG. I want the blood work. Isn't a rigid protocol better than missing a deadly condition just because the doctor thought I was just anxious?
That is the exact logical defense that upholds the current system, and it is a very compelling argument. Tests, scans, and blood work absolutely have a vital place in modern medicine. No one is arguing we should go back to the dark ages of guessing.
Right, of course not.
But the critical distinction Dr. Srivatsa makes is about the order and the reliance on these tools.
What do you mean by the order?
Well, when you rely only on standardized tests, or when you use tests as a blind starting point rather than a targeted tool to confirm a strong pre-existing clinical suspicion, you strip away the individualized care.
Oh, I see. You're saying the test should confirm the doctor's intuition, not replace it entirely.
Precisely. And the danger of the protocol-first approach is rooted in a mathematical reality that most patients just don't understand. Tests are not perfect.
We tend to treat them like they are.
We treat lab results as if they are divine truth. But they are subject to equipment failure, expired reagents, cross-contamination, and just basic human error in the lab.
Right.
More importantly, every single test has an inherent rate of false positives and false negatives.
Which brings in Bayes' theorem, doesn't it? The probability of a test being accurate depends heavily on how likely the person was to have the disease in the first place.
Exactly. So if you take a patient who has an incredibly low probability of having a rare disease.
Like our patient whose symptoms are entirely driven by that imagined fear.
Yes. If you run a massive battery of standardized screening tests on them just to satisfy a rigid hospital protocol, the statistical likelihood of generating a false positive or finding an incidentaloma skyrockets.
An incidentaloma, I love that term. Just a harmless anomaly that looks suspicious on a scan.
Right. But a false positive, I mean, it is like throwing jet fuel on that biological fear fire we talked about earlier.
It's catastrophic for the patient's psychology.
Completely. If a terrified patient comes in and a flawed test throws back a false positive for a severe condition, that patient is plunged into unimaginable mental anguish.
And the medical system then responds with a cascade of intervention.
Yes, they are thrust into this relentless spiral of more invasive tests, painful biopsies, specialist consultations, and preemptive medications.
They enter the medical machine, and it's incredibly hard to get out.
It really is.
The sources actually argue that this cycle conditions patients. It essentially brainwashes them into a state of learned helplessness.
That's a great way to put it.
They truly start to believe that their bodies are fragile, broken machines, and that only drugs, tests, and constant scanning can cure them, knowing full well that drugs often rarely do. It creates a lifelong, highly profitable dependency on the medical system. People end up suffering in silence, their entire well-being dictated by waiting for the next test result to tell them whether they are allowed to feel healthy.
And, to fully grasp how deeply entrenched this protocol-driven, test-heavy culture is, we have to look at its historical roots.
Let's get into the history.
The source material provides some fascinating, albeit controversial, historical context that explains how medical education itself was fundamentally reshaped to support this exact model.
Yes, and I want to be super clear with you listening right now. We are looking at the historical claims precisely as they are presented in the provided source material. We are impartially reporting the text analysis of the pharmaceutical industry and medical history. We aren't taking a political side or endorsing a specific ideology here. We are simply analyzing the architectural blueprint of the system as it's described in our documents.
Exactly. So the text points directly back to the early 20th century in the United States, specifically citing the influence of figures like John D. Rockefeller and the founding of the Rockefeller Institute in Chicago.
Okay.
The sources argue that this era marked a deliberate structural shift in how doctors were trained.
This aligns with the era of the Flexner Report, right, where medical education became highly standardized and deeply integrated with the booming chemical and pharmaceutical industries.
Exactly. The argument presented in the text is that these newly standardized medical schools moved away from holistic, narrative-based healing. They began teaching doctors almost exclusively to identify symptoms and prescribe corresponding pharmaceutical medicines.
So it's cemented a cultural and economic system where, according to the source, profit and prescriptions ruled.
That's the quote, yeah. And the text goes even further. It suggests that this culture of medical dependency is instilled in us from infancy.
Really? From infancy?
Yeah, it claims that starting from when we are less than a year old, we are systematically taught to ignore our body's natural resilience. We're taught to instead rely entirely on external medical interventions. We are literally trained to be dependent consumers of healthcare.
Wow. So if we pull all of these threads together, the biological vulnerability to fear, the bottleneck of the emergency rooms, the statistical unreliability of blanket testing, and the century-long industrialization of medical education.
It's a lot.
It is a lot. But we can finally understand the impossible bind that the modern honest doctor is trapped in.
Yes, the honest doctor is the one who suffers here too.
Because if a veteran doctor sits down, truly listens to the patient's story, recognizes that the chest pain is just a severe anxiety response masking as angina, and simply tries to reassure the patient.
Tries to sell happiness.
Right. Sends them home with advice to rest and lower their stress. That doctor is actually taking a massive professional and legal risk.
They are risking their entire career because they deviated from the protocol.
The rigid guidelines dictated by hospital management state that if symptom X is reported, test Y must be ordered, regardless of the doctor's clinical intuition.
The sources clearly state that honest doctors who simply tried to do their historical duty, to reassure patients and avoid unnecessary testing, they were systematically victimized.
Victimized, blamed for their behavior, audited, and severely criticized for deviating from those accepted management protocols.
Which perfectly transitions us into the reality of what happens when you actually try to fight that system from the inside.
Because this isn't just an abstract sociological theory for Dr. Srivatsa. This is his actual lived experience. He was a whistleblower who faced the absolute wrath of an entrenched bureaucracy.
He really did. Let's examine his track record, because it's vital to understand that he wasn't just some fringe outsider complaining. Dr. Srivatsa was deeply embedded in the traditional medical establishment. He was actively trying to improve it.
He was a recognized innovator.
Yes. He even invented and patented a physical medical device called the cannula.
Oh, right, the cannula.
Yeah, which was officially exhibited at the Medical Technology Conference back in 2006.
And for you listening who might not know, a cannula is a tube that can be inserted into the body, often for the delivery or removal of fluid. They are notorious vectors for hospital-acquired infections.
Exactly.
So here's a doctor actively engineering solutions to make hospitals safer. He's a problem solver.
A pragmatic problem solver. But his trajectory took a severe dark turn in the early 2000s when he was working as a general practitioner within the United Kingdom's National Health Service, the NHS. Well, in 2003, the system was already feeling the strain of the bottleneck we discussed earlier. To try and alleviate the pressure on doctors, the NHS introduced a pilot nurse-led practice model.
Okay, the theory being, if we have a massive influx of patients with minor issues or imagined fears, let's train nurses to examine them, run them through a diagnostic checklist, and even prescribe antibiotics.
Right. It sounds efficient on paper.
On paper, sure.
And initially, Dr. Rivasa participated, hoping it might actually ease the burden. But by 2004, his clinical experience forced him to raise serious alarms.
Because what was he seeing?
He was observing firsthand that nurse practitioners and local chemists at these walk-in clinics were consistently making incorrect diagnoses. And crucially, they were inappropriately prescribing antibiotics for viral infections or stress-related symptoms.
Well, of course. Because diagnosing a human being isn't the same as following a flowchart. A checklist can't hear the nuance in a patient's story.
No, it can't.
It can't differentiate between the pattern of a localized bacterial infection and the systemic fatigue of severe chronic anxiety.
Precisely. So Dr. Srivatsa took an incredibly bold ethical stand. The sources state he formally approached the UK's General Medical Council, the GMC, which is the regulatory body for doctors.
Okay.
He demanded that they strictly define the legal and clinical definition of the word doctor.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he was essentially asking the regulators, can a nurse armed with a statistical checklist legally and safely replace the diagnostic intuition of a physician with a decade of training? And furthermore, he flat out refused to continue training nurses to prescribe these potent drugs.
Good for him. But I imagine the Empire struck back.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because he acted as a whistleblower for patient safety, and because he refused to adhere to management protocols that he knew were flawed, he was systematically targeted. The bureaucracy just turned on him.
The local primary care trust, or PCT, which managed the clinics, launched a full-scale investigation into him. And this wasn't a quick review. This was an agonizing process that dragged on for almost 2 years.
2 years of having your professional life completely suspended. The sources describe this period as torturous. The PCT stopped paying him.
They actively prevented him from finding alternative work as a locum doctor, too, right?
Yeah, which is a temporary fill-in physician. They systematically drove a highly experienced, innovative doctor into severe financial ruin.
That is just awful.
The stress destroyed his family life, forced him out of his home in the UK, and eventually drove him to relocate to Germany in 2011 and later back to India.
What is truly fascinating and deeply tragic, really, is what his personal ordeal reveals about the broader systemic disease infecting global healthcare infrastructure.
Right. It's not just the NHS.
No, the sources don't just point to a problem in the UK. They point to a severe global managerial crisis. Medicine is increasingly being dictated by administrators and managers who hold business degrees, not medical degrees.
The text is incredibly blunt about this. It says, and I quote, "Hospital managers who've never examined a patient dictate how doctors should practice medicine."
It is the ultimate MBA-ification of healthcare.
That's exactly what it is. Doctors are being stripped of their autonomy. They're reduced to highly paid data entry clerks.
They are given strict 10-minute slots to meet quantitative throughput targets.
Yes.
You cannot possibly listen to the story of an illness, unpack a patient's deep-seated psychological fears, and safely sell happiness in 600 seconds.
Not while simultaneously clicking through 5 screens of mandatory electronic health record forms to satisfy billing requirements.
It's impossible. The qualitative, deeply human doctor-patient relationship is being entirely sacrificed on the altar of quantitative business metrics.
And coming to terms with this reality was the ultimate turning point for Dr. Srivatsa. Having seen the machinery of the system from the inside out, and having been personally crushed by it for simply trying to uphold his Hippocratic oath, he had a profound realization.
What was it?
Fighting the bureaucracy from within was a mathematically losing battle.
The system was just too entrenched, too highly capitalized, and far too resistant to systemic change. If you try to change the protocol, they just revoke your license.
Exactly. He realized that to save medicine, he had to build a tool that bypassed the systemic gatekeepers entirely. He needed to extract the core value of a physician, that diagnostic intuition, and the ability to reassure and put that power directly into the hands of the patient.
Which brings us to the absolute turning point of our deep dive. Enter Dr. Maya and the profound, game-changing application of artificial intelligence. This is where the narrative shifts from a tragedy of bureaucratic overreach into a story of technological liberation.
It is, and it's crucial to understand the evolution of this idea because Dr. Srivatsa's concept didn't begin as a multi-million-dollar AI software program.
Oh, it didn't.
No, it started as an incredibly simple, low-tech physical tool. He originally created a literal fridge magnet.
A fridge magnet? Seriously?
Yes, he called it MAYA, which was an acronym for Medical Advice You Access. It featured a simplified list of common symptoms categorized by color, designed to help families pause and logically evaluate if they truly needed to rush to the emergency room at 2 a.m.
And there's a beautiful philosophical double meaning here, right? Because in classical Indian philosophy, Maya translates to illusion.
Yes, which conceptually ties everything we've discussed perfectly together. The tool was designed to cut through the illusion of imagined fear, and specifically to break the culturally ingrained illusion that only a doctor with a prescription pad can save your life.
That's brilliant, but I mean, a fridge magnet can only hold so much logic.
Right.
The real breakthrough, the moment that elevated this from a clever idea to a global paradigm shift, happened when Dr. Srivatsa intersected with the advent of large language models, specifically ChatGPT.
Yes.
He had spent years compiling decades of his clinical intuition into a book called The Art of Self-Diagnosis. And when he fed that text along with his color-coded symptom logic into ChatGPT, something completely unexpected happened.
This is arguably one of the most pivotal moments in the intersection of digital technology and healthcare. Historically, when technologists tried to build AI doctors, they relied on the exact same rigid statistical architectures that the human doctors were being forced to use.
Oh, interesting.
They built massive decision trees based on Boolean logic. If symptom A is present and blood test B is above 50, then disease C is 80% likely. It was incredibly rigid and often failed in the real messy world of clinical medicine.
Because human biology doesn't fit neatly into an Excel spreadsheet.
Exactly. But ChatGPT and modern large language models, they do not operate on rigid decision trees. They operate on neural networks utilizing vector embeddings in high-dimensional mathematical space.
So when Dr. Srivatsa fed his clinical logic into the system,
The LLM didn't just memorize the rules. The sources note that ChatGPT actually recognized the tone of his voice.
really?
Yeah. It absorbed the nuance of his 40 years of experience, and instead of acting like a rigid statistical calculator, it embraced pattern recognition.
It started thinking like a master clinician.
Yes.
Let's use an analogy here. The old statistical models are like a novice chess player. The novice looks at the board and calculates every single legal move one by one, constantly checking the rulebook. It's slow and rigid.
Right.
But an AI running on pattern recognition is like a chess grandmaster. The grandmaster doesn't calculate every single move. They just look at the board and instantly recognize the pattern of the pieces. They intuitively understand the flow of the game based on thousands of previous matches.
That is an exceptional analogy. An experienced veteran doctor doesn't diagnose based on a single symptom in isolation. They look at the entire pattern.
Can you give an example?
Sure. For example, a minor viral illness might present a pattern of a low-grade fever, general fatigue, and a scratchy throat. But a severe bacterial infection presents a distinctly different pattern. A rapidly spiking high fever, intense localized pain, and progressively worsening symptoms over a few hours.
Right.
ChatGPT, equipped with Dr. Srivatsa's framework, was able to synthesize these incredibly complex, multivariable patterns instantaneously. And it communicates this immense computational power to the user through a brilliantly simple, color-coded interface. Let's break down the Dr. Maya system colors because the genius is in the simplicity.
Go for it.
First, there's red. Red means immediate doctor consultation is required. This is a genuine medical emergency. The pattern matches a severe threat.
Okay, that's straightforward.
Then there's yellow. Yellow indicates you should consult a pharmacist. You might need some over-the-counter intervention, but you don't need the ER.
Right.
Then we have green. Green means the pattern is safe for nurse-led management or simply self-care at home. Rest, hydration, and time.
The burnt toast.
Exactly, the burnt toast. And finally, there's blue. And blue is perhaps the most globally critical code, which we'll explore deeply in a moment. Blue indicates a potential highly infectious illness where immediate isolation is recommended.
If we pull this technology back to the neurobiology of fear we discussed earlier, the true revolutionary power of this color-coded AI becomes clear.
Because it acts as a cognitive behavioral circuit breaker for the amygdala.
Exactly. Remember, the conscious mind is panicking because it lacks certainty. The patient feels a symptom, the imagination takes over, the what-ifs multiply, and the physiological smoke alarm starts blaring.
But then, the terrified patient pulls out their phone, opens the Dr. Maya app, and inputs their symptoms.
The AI calmly and instantly analyzes the pattern, and instead of throwing them into a web search where they convince themselves they have a rare cancer, the AI returns a green code.
And crucially, it logically explains why it's green based on the recognized pattern. It interrupts the fear loop. It provides the conscious, rational mind with a clear, authoritative framework to grasp onto.
The moment the conscious mind accepts the logic of the green code, the amygdala stands down. The HPA axis stops pumping cortisol. The smoke alarm is turned off.
And most importantly, the panic that leads to unnecessary hospital visits, the clogging of the emergency room, and the demanding of antibiotics is stopped dead in its tracks.
And the performance data backing this up is nothing short of staggering. The sources claim this AI system boasts a 98% diagnostic accuracy rate and an 85% reduction in diagnostic errors.
85%.
85%.
That is not an incremental improvement. That is a complete disruption of the field. It is taking the intuitive, hard-won genius of a 40-year veteran doctor and scaling it infinitely to the entire globe.
It is infinitely scalable software, yes. But here we run into the physical limits of reality.
Right, the access problem.
An incredibly smart app on a smartphone is only useful for populations who actually possess smartphones.
And reliable cellular internet, reliable electricity to charge the phone, and the digital literacy to navigate the App Store.
Which brings us to one of the most intractable hurdles in global health, the access gap.
Telemedicine is great if you're a tech worker in Silicon Valley. It is completely useless if you are an 85-year-old grandmother in an off-grid village in rural India. If Dr. Srivatsa's AI is going to actually solve the global healthcare crisis and stop pandemics, it has to physically reach the unconnected.
And this is the problem that the Prema kiosks solve.
Prema.
Yes, it stands for Personal, Responsive, Empowering Medical Assistance. Dr. Srivatsa didn't stop at software. He engineered a hardware solution to eradicate the access gap. These are standalone, physically robust health kiosks.
Let's talk about the engineering of these units because it's brilliant in its autonomy. They don't rely on the fragile infrastructure of the developing world. They are powered by integrated solar panels or heavy-duty rechargeable batteries.
Right. They don't even require a persistent high-speed cellular network to function locally.
You could literally airdrop one of these units into the middle of a remote agricultural village in Karnataka or a massive refugee camp or even an underserved, impoverished urban neighborhood in a major Western city, and it just works.
It just works. But accessibility is about much more than just electrons and internet signals. It's about language and literacy.
And this is where the system shines. The Prema kiosks feature intuitive touchscreen interfaces coupled with natural voice guidance in over 30 different languages and local dialects.
The personas provided in the text really illustrate the impact here. Let's look at that 85-year-old grandmother in rural Karnataka.
Huh.
She has never touched a digital device in her life. She might be completely illiterate, but she can walk up to this solar-powered kiosk, press a single button, and speak to it naturally in her native dialect.
And the AI just listens.
The AI, utilizing Dr. Maya's pattern recognition, will listen to her story, analyze the nuance of her symptoms, and give her a clear, color-coded triage recommendation that she can understand.
Or consider the other end of the spectrum. A Polish construction worker living in London.
Right.
He might be experiencing severe chest pain, but he delays going to the NHS clinic because he knows he can't accurately describe the crushing sensation in English, and he's terrified of being misunderstood. The kiosk eliminates that linguistic barrier instantly.
He speaks Polish to the machine. The machine understands the medical pattern, and it tells him in Polish that he has a red code and needs an ambulance.
It's incredible. And there's a specific, deeply profound feature of this system that addresses a deeply entrenched historical sociological failure in medicine.
Yes. The Prema system includes advanced voice dictation tools.
The sources explicitly highlight how crucial this feature is for marginalized groups, particularly women from lower socioeconomic backgrounds who have historically been silenced, dismissed, or actively ignored by the traditional medical establishment.
That part of the research really hit me hard. The history of medicine is fraught with the dismissal of women's pain.
Labeling it as hysteria or just anxiety.
Exactly. Society has constructed massive barriers that make it incredibly difficult for these individuals to advocate for their own physical health without facing judgment or stigma.
If a marginalized woman tries to explain a complex cluster of symptoms to an overworked, exhausted doctor who only has 10 minutes to see her, she is highly likely to be dismissed.
But the AI does not have implicit bias. It doesn't judge socioeconomic status, race, or gender. When that woman sits at a Prema kiosk and dictates her symptoms, the AI just listens to the pattern.
It gives her unlimited time to articulate her concerns fully.
Yes, it validates her experience mathematically and gives her an objective color code that she can then take to a clinic as proof. It gives the voiceless a definitive medical voice. It is the ultimate tool for self-advocacy.
It empowers the individual patient medically, but we also have to talk about the economic brilliance of this deployment model. These kiosks aren't just vending machines dispensing medical advice. They are engineered to be micro-businesses.
Yes, the franchise model.
Yeah.
The text points out that in regions like India, there are millions of educated women who are either unemployed or forced to work for poverty-level wages in domestic servitude.
By becoming an operator of a Prema kiosk, an individual can transform their socioeconomic status.
They become a vital, self-employed, frontline healthcare facilitator within their own community. The community pays a tiny, affordable micro fee to use the kiosk, and the operator earns a living wage.
It's a holistic solution that injects health, literacy, dignity, and economic stability directly into the most vulnerable neighborhoods.
It is a remarkable synthesis of technology and social entrepreneurship. But as powerful as empowering an individual patient or local entrepreneur is, we must now zoom out.
Because while this system offers profound relief on an individual level, the ultimate stakes of what Dr. Srivatsa's technology is fighting against are truly existential for the entire human species.
This is where the story shifts from fixing the hospital waiting room to literally ensuring the survival of humanity.
Because while the news cycle is dominated by world leaders arguing over borders, trade wars, and geopolitics, the actual imminent threat to our civilization is microscopic, and it is evolving faster than we are.
We are talking about the terrifying reality of antimicrobial resistance, or AMR.
Let's trace this back to the very beginning of our conversation. Remember, the panicked patient who felt a symptom, assumed the worst, rushed to the clinic, and successfully demanded something strong from a hurried doctor.
The person who got a course of potent antibiotics for a viral infection or a stress response.
Yes. Now, multiply that single flawed interaction by billions of occurrences over the last 50 years. Decades of systemic overprescription and agricultural abuse of antibiotics have created an evolutionary pressure cooker.
We have actively trained bacteria and viruses to survive our strongest weapons.
To understand how this works, we need another analogy. Think of a bacterial cell wall, like a highly secure vault, and an antibiotic is a master key designed to pick the lock and blow the vault wide open.
Okay, I'm following.
For decades, our master keys worked perfectly, but bacteria mutate rapidly. Through sheer evolutionary trial and error, they have learned how to change the locks. Some have even developed the biological equivalent of armed guards.
Armed guards.
Yeah, efflux pumps that literally spit the antibiotic back out before it can work. Or enzymes that physically dismantle the antibiotic molecule. They have become superbugs.
That is exactly the mechanism of AMR. And the statistical projections provided in the sources regarding the spread of these superbugs are nothing short of apocalyptic.
What are the numbers here?
Antimicrobial resistance is projected to reach an astonishing 52% by the year 2028.
2028 is practically tomorrow. What does a 52% resistance rate actually look like in daily life?
It means that more than half of the standard infections circulating in the population might not respond to our first-line or even second-line treatments. It means we are staring down the barrel of a post-antibiotic era.
So a simple scrape on your knee from gardening, a routine appendectomy, a minor respiratory infection, or a basic dental procedure.
Events that we currently consider trivial.
Right. They could once again become fatal, untreatable conditions, just as they were in the 19th century.
The economic and human toll of returning to the dark ages of medicine is almost unfathomable. The text states that if we do not radically alter our trajectory, AMR could cost the global economy an estimated $100 trillion.
100 trillion.
And cause 100 million premature deaths by the year 2050.
100 million people.
Yeah. And this terrifying reality brings us back to the Dr. Maya AI, and specifically to that final color code we mentioned earlier, the blue code.
The blue code indicates a potential infection where isolation is recommended.
Yes. To truly grasp how powerful this simple blue screen could be in saving those 100 million lives, we need to analyze a real-world epidemiological case study provided in our sources.
The 2019 World Health Organization protocol regarding the massive Campylobacter outbreak in Askøy, Norway. Let's deep dive into the Askøy incident. Let's set the stage.
Okay.
Askøy is an island municipality in Norway with a population of roughly 29,500 people. They relied on 3 different municipal water supply systems.
The one in question, Water Supply System A, provided water to about 12,000 inhabitants.
And the critical detail here is the infrastructure. It was built back in the 1950s, and it utilized reservoirs that were blasted directly into unlined mountain caverns.
From an engineering and epidemiological standpoint, an unlined mountain cavern acting as a water reservoir is a massive vulnerability. It is highly susceptible to geological shifts, runoff, and groundwater contamination.
And in early June of 2019, that vulnerability was catastrophically exploited. The timeline of what happened next is crucial to understand why our current pandemic response is so flawed.
Walk us through the timeline.
Within a single 24-hour window, 10 people in Askøy became so violently ill that they were hospitalized. Simultaneously, 30 more people consulted out-of-hours emergency doctors.
All of them were presenting with the exact same severe pattern: high fever, intense abdominal pain, and severe diarrhea.
Under the standard global WHO guidelines for outbreak investigation, the absolute critical step 1 is to detect and confirm the outbreak and agent.
Right. In Askøy, the local chief medical officer noticed this sudden, highly unusual spike in gastroenteritis cases, concentrated entirely within one specific geographic area.
They reported it up the chain. The authorities eventually linked the cluster back to a massive Campylobacter contamination in Reservoir X. They issued an emergency boil water advisory to the public, and they took the infected reservoir offline.
Okay, but let's critically examine the actual mechanics of that timeline. The system worked, but it worked reactively.
Right. It required 24 hours of people getting progressively sicker. It required them to get sick enough to actually travel to the hospital.
It required the exhausted ER doctors to notice the pattern amidst all the other chaos, manually communicate that trend to the Central Health Institute, and then wait for the authorities to figure out the water supply link before any action was taken to warn the public.
And in the context of an exponentially spreading pathogen, a 24-hour lag in detection is an absolute eternity.
Exactly. Let's talk about the reproduction number, R0. If a pathogen has a high R0, every infected person is infecting 3 or 4 others while they wait in that 24-hour window.
They are using public bathrooms, they are touching door handles on the bus on the way to the clinic, and then they are sitting in a crowded hospital waiting room, coughing and sweating next to people with compromised immune systems.
The current protocol literally guarantees massive cross-infection.
Now, let's run a simulation. Let's reimagine the Askøy outbreak. But this time, the municipality is fully integrated with the Prema kiosk and Dr. Maya app network. We are overlaying Dr. Srivatsa's AI onto the timeline.
Right, let's run it.
It's early June, the water is contaminated. The first few people take a drink and start feeling that initial wave of abdominal pain and fever. But instead of waiting 12 hours until they are agonizingly sick and forced to travel to the emergency room, they immediately pull out their smartphone, or they walk down the street to the local solar-powered Prema kiosk.
They input their symptoms into the interface. The AI, acting as the master chess player, instantly recognizes the pattern. It doesn't dismiss it as stress, and it doesn't give them a green code for a mild stomachache.
It processes the severity and gives them a blue code.
Yes, the screen clearly states, you have a high probability of an infectious gastrointestinal illness. Do not travel to a crowded clinic. Do not use public transport. Isolate at home immediately and hydrate.
So, step 1, you've instantly stopped the infected patient from becoming a vector in the hospital waiting room. You've protected the doctors and the other patients.
But the real magic, the true global defense mechanism, happens on the back end of the software, because these apps and kiosks are all networked together globally.
This is the concept of syndromic surveillance at the speed of light.
Yes. The moment a cluster of, say, 5 to 10 people in the exact same geographic radius of Askøy receive a blue code for the exact same symptom pattern within a narrow time window, the central system triggers an automated, high-priority alert.
It bypasses the manual reporting lag completely.
It alerts local public health officials and the network of local doctors instantly, in real time, before a single patient ever sets foot inside the physical hospital doors.
The public health authorities would look at their digital dashboard and see a massive, anomalous geographical cluster of blue codes forming perfectly around the distribution lines of water supply system A.
They would see the heat map lighting up within minutes of the first symptoms appearing, not days.
They could have issued the text message boil water advisory and physically shut down Reservoir X hours before those initial 10 people ever deteriorated to the point of needing hospitalization.
It stops the outbreak at the literal source. It transforms public health from a slow, reactive forensic investigation into a proactive, intelligence-driven defense grid.
Dr. Srivatsa writes explicitly that modern hospitals must use this system as a digital gatekeeper to prevent future pandemics from ever occurring.
And when you look at the raw mechanics of how viruses spread, it makes perfect, undeniable logical sense.
It's an elegant solution. It protects the physical safety of the healthcare workers by keeping contagious people out of the ER. It protects the patients by giving them immediate, accurate guidance.
And, crucially, circling back to the AMR thread, it definitively stops the catastrophic overuse of antibiotics by reassuring the vast majority of non-infected, purely anxious people that they are safe, stopping them from demanding drugs they don't need.
So we've covered immense ground today. Let's pull all of these threads together and synthesize the journey.
Sound good?
We began this deep dive by looking inward at the fundamental neurobiology of the human brain. We explored the tragic biological glitch where the conscious mind and the ancient amygdala cannot differentiate between the physical reality of a predator and the imagined fear of a symptom.
We saw how that single biological vulnerability feeds a massive, rigid, protocol-heavy medical-industrial complex. A system that, whether intentionally or not, profits immensely off of our panic, conditioning us from infancy into a state of learned helplessness and lifelong pharmaceutical dependency.
We followed the harrowing personal journey of Dr. Srivatsa. We saw an honest, innovative physician who tried to uphold the sacred duty of listening to the patient's story, only to be systematically victimized and financially ruined by a bureaucracy run by managers who care more about throughput metrics than human healing.
He realized that you cannot fix a broken, entrenched paradigm from within the walls of the hospital. You have to transcend it entirely.
And his method of transcendence was to harness the high-dimensional pattern recognition capabilities of advanced large language models to create Dr. Maya, a system that finally cuts through the illusion.
It uses the most advanced technology on Earth to empower you, the individual listener, to actually understand your own physiology.
It translates the terrifying, chaotic language of physical symptoms into a simple, calming, logical color code.
It gives a powerful, unignorable voice to marginalized communities through the autonomous Prema kiosks. And in doing so, it quietly builds a real-time, global digital defense network capable of stopping the next apocalyptic superbug dead in its tracks.
The relevance of this entire framework to you, listening to this right now, is incredibly profound. We are taught that health freedom is about having elite insurance or hoarding prescription pills just in case. But true health freedom is internal. It begins with wellness, knowledge, and a deep, logical understanding of your own body's resilience.
It is entirely about trusting yourself.
It's about knowing that when the biological smoke alarm starts blaring in your chest, you now have the tools and the framework to logically check the kitchen, see that it's just burnt toast, and calmly turn off the alarm without unnecessarily calling the fire department and burning down the system in the process.
Which leaves us with a fascinating and perhaps deeply disruptive implication for the future of society.
Yes, I want to leave you with this final provocative thought to mull over as we wrap up. We have thoroughly established today that the multi-trillion-dollar global healthcare system, the massive pharmaceutical conglomerates, the sprawling insurance agencies, the corporate hospital networks, it is all fundamentally economically built on the foundation of our instinctual evolutionary fear of illness and death.
That profound biological terror is the fuel that keeps the entire economic engine running.
So what happens to the balance of power in the world? What happens to those trillion-dollar industries when artificial intelligence finally teaches humanity how to be completely unafraid?
It points toward a future where the X-ray machine and the lead panel aren't used as weapons to prove how broken and sick we are, but rather as tools to simply confirm how incredibly capable our bodies are of healing themselves.
Exactly. The diagnostic muddy waters that have obscured medicine for a century finally clear up, not because we invented sharper scalpels or stronger chemicals to attack the disease, but because we finally evolved enough to stop fearing the ripples.